spirit of what we want to do. I want to thank you for what you're doing from home to continue the efforts in your respective agencies. And I want to encourage you to continue in the fight. Um, we are definitely going through trials, and there's absolutely a lot of challenges that we're facing. But as we're fond of saying nowadays, we're not in this alone. We're in this together, and we'll get through it. So without further ado, we have really a a person who's going to bring us a lot of information. You already see up on your screen the presentation. We have Joseph Salvo um, from oh, he's a chief demographer from in the population division from New York City Department of City Planning. And I'm personally looking forward to some updates in regards to this. So I will turn the proverbial mic over to Mr. Salvo. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Marika. Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me, right? Marika, you can hear me? Chris, we're good? Okay? Good.
Mhm.
Good. I apologize. My camera has a mind of its own, and apparently something's up, but I don't want to touch anything because if I do, everyone in this call knows what will happen. I'll probably cut myself off entirely. What I want to do is give you an overview of where we stand on self-response in the Bronx. Many of you know through Tracy, I've been circulating weekly reports. They come out every Friday um, on the status of self-response. My staff and I do an analysis of response rates by neighborhood each week. And the main reason we do it is to encourage people to conduct outreach that is informed by the latest data. So with that, let me move on here and talk a little bit about the revised census schedule. Many of you probably already know this. I wanted to go over it in any case. We know that there are three ways right now to respond to the census: internet, paper, and telephone. And I'll go into that a little further in a few minutes. I'll talk further about that. The schedule now that the Census Bureau has followed is that in the fourth mailing, there are a total of 5 mailings. In the fourth mailing to non-responding households, everybody got paper. Okay, everybody got a paper questionnaire on that fourth mailing, which took place April 8th to April 30th. And then the final mailing, or the fifth mailing, at least for this part of the cycle, started April 27th and just ended May 9th. There was a reminder postcard sent to all non-responding households. Now, the big news is that non-response follow-up, which was originally supposed to start the first week of May, has been put off until August 15th. That is when the enumerators will go and knock on doors. They will start doing that in the middle of August. The pandemic has obviously created a situation where you cannot put 15 or 20,000 people on the streets of the city to knock on doors. So the Census Bureau has proposed, and all indications are that the Congress is actually going to act in somewhat bipartisan fashion, which is kind of amazing, to approve as part of this next bill essentially an extension of the census by 120 days, which means that technically the census does not end until October 31st. And during this entire period, you can self-respond to the request from the Census Bureau. Okay, now the extended time frame. What are the ramifications? What it means is that the period of self-response has now been greatly extended to the middle of August. In other words, between now and the middle, I'm sorry, the middle of August, between now and the middle of August, um, anyone can self-respond. Okay, you can actually self-respond to October 31st, but between now and the middle of August, self-response will continue to be the only way to provide the Census Bureau with information. And again, that's phone, paper, or via the internet. Now, the good news, if you try to find silver linings, and I always try to find them, when you have more self-response, you get more accurate information and the count is better. So there's a real opportunity here because of texting, social media, phone banking, and maybe partial openings that occur in the months to come, that we can get more and more people to self-respond. The downside, especially given, the changes in residence, we've all read articles about people temporarily relocating, especially students. The downside is that there may be a recall issue. If somebody asks, well, how many people lived in your apartment, your house, as of April 1st, 2020, it might be a little difficult for people to respond to that because of these shifts in residence that we've now seen. And if you have questions later on, I'll be happy to take them. Okay, now, some of you may have seen this map before. This is a contact strategy map, as we call it. These are the census tracts in the Bronx, all of the tracts in the Bronx, and divided up based upon the first point of contact. That first point of contact in the purples, the purple colored tracts, what we call internet first, meaning the letter that was sent out indicated in the purple tracks that you needed to go to the internet in order to respond to the census. Okay, and you'll see two shades of that purple. The darker shade, that request, that letter came in bilingual form, Spanish, English, and the lighter shade, it was English only. But the point being that these are census tracts where everyone received just the letter on the first mailing. Then we have the green census tracts, which are called internet choice because they gave those households a choice initially. They sent both paper and a request to go to the internet, the lighter color being only in English and the darker greens. You see there's a lot of those bilingual Spanish English. Now, the Bronx got more paper than any of the boroughs, okay? More paper than any of the boroughs. This is a snippet from our recent report on self-response by borough. And what we're looking at here is the breakout of how much of the total response used paper and what we call other modes, phone. Phone is tiny, okay? Paper is the bulk of all this. In other words, of all of the self-response in New York City on May 14th, what percentage came in as paper? And you see it was only 17% for the city. But the Bronx, it was almost a third of the total responses. And that has to do with all the greens that you saw on the previous map, that the Bronx got more paper than any other borough. And there's a variety of reasons for this. It has to do with the identification of internet deserts, the fact that there are groups of people that don't have access to the internet. The digital divide is serious in some neighborhoods. It also has to do with response on the American Community Survey. If people tended to respond in the ACS via paper, then the Census Bureau was more likely to deliver paper to those neighborhoods. And we see there's been increases throughout, but you can see that the Bronx really is very different from the standpoint of how the census, has how people have responded to the census. Okay, now let's look at May 18th by tract at the self-response rates. You see in the map, New York City's self-response rate is running at 49.1%. That is almost exactly 10 points under the nation. Okay? So New York City has been tracking about 81% of the nation in terms of response, and that's been fairly consistent over the last few weeks. So we are lagging. Very important that the nation is lagging. The nation's barely at 60%, and this is well under where it was in 2010. Now, let's look at the Bronx. The Bronx is actually slightly higher in terms of total response relative to the city overall. And half of Bronxites households, have responded to the census as of May 18th. But when you look at this map, what immediately you see is that there's a lot of differences by neighborhood. Okay, I put the track map up here just to show you those blue outlines are what we call NTAs, neighborhood tabulation area boundaries. Okay, so the next map I'm going to show you is a map which simply of the NTAs. Can you see my cursor? Chris?
Yes. Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's great. We can go back to the earlier map. We can go back to this map later on, but I'm going to, I want to talk to you about neighborhoods. So we're going to use this neighborhood template. These are the NTAs in the Bronx. Okay, one of the things I want to point out is the mix of race and ethnic groups in the borough. I show this here because those of you, I would imagine most of you know what's here, but the Bronx is New York City's, Hispanic, predominantly Hispanic borough. The current estimate is that 56% of the borough is Hispanic. You see about 1 of 10 non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, 29%. You see small Asian and other. And what I wanted to do was just give you a sense of what these mixes look like. And you can see, for example, in the South Bronx, that were primarily black and Hispanic populations. As you go east, it gets more of a mix with European whites. As you move north, in a place like Pelham Parkway, the Pelham Parkway area, Pelham Gardens, and then Allerton, you have a bit of a UN. I always like to think about it. I always think about Allerton Avenue as being kind of the meeting point for so many different groups. You have Hispanic, European in the form of new Albanian immigrants, for example. But I'm telling you guys, which you already probably know. And the West Indian influence up in Community District 12 is heavy, and you see that reflected in the purple with the dark. Here you have a whole blend of West Indian communities. In general, the West Bronx and the Central Bronx has now experienced a big inundation of Dominican immigrants. If you take a look at, and you want to look toward the future, you would realize that something like 28% of all births occurring in the Bronx are to Dominican women from the Dominican Republic. So that's kind of gives you a sense of where we're going. But of course, right across here, we have Washington Heights, and a lot of the Dominicans from Washington Heights have moved into the West Bronx, in some cases, many cases replacing Puerto Ricans, but the Puerto Rican population is still very high. But one of the big indicators in the Bronx, demographically speaking, it's fascinating, is that there was a time when the Bronx was only 20 or 22% foreign born. And this wasn't a long time ago. It was like in 2000. Now the Bronx is up to the city average of 37, 38% foreign born. And the reason for that is the heavy influence of Hispanic immigrants in the borough. And this is a blend, everybody from the people from Honduras, from Central and South America, but most heavily from the Dominican Republic. And then when you get up into Spuyten Duyvil, up into Riverdale, you again have this European white mix along with other groups. Just kind of a general overview. Now, as we go to the next map, this is the response rate map as of May 18th by neighborhood tabulation area, NTA. And what immediately strikes you is the disparities that exist in the borough. Now, I don't know if any of you caught, there's this newspaper called The City. I don't know how many of you have seen this today. There is an article that came out this morning, and that article talks about how Co-op City has just about the highest self-response rate in the entire city. And if you look at Co-op City in Parkchester, they are stellar in terms of their response. In fact, Co-op City is higher than the nation in terms of its response rate. But then you go across 95, Route 95, and you head into Community District 12, and you look at a cluster of low response. Wakefield, Williamsbridge, Baychester, Eastchester. These areas all in here are showing pretty significant deficits. And I'm going to go into something in a minute that will help you, I believe, with your outreach. The other cluster that we're worried about, and ironically, right around Parkchester, is this cluster involving Van Nest, Morris Park, down into Unionport, at least a portion of Soundview. I would call this Soundview, Bruckner, the area that we're talking about, this cluster around Parkchester, which is really interesting. The whole West Farms area, which is coming up really low. And you see the lowest category here is under 44.2. So this is really lagging. It's lagging the city and lagging the nation. And I want you to look at the range involved here. We've got 44, and then the top, this is a 10-point range across neighborhoods, and well under the average for the Bronx and under the average for the city. So these are areas that need attention. Many of you know what we're talking about here. This is Bronx Park, by the way, okay, the Bronx Zoo and Botanicals. And this is Belmont. Belmont has not done very well in the enumeration so far. And we can see here, that it is in the lowest rung. Interestingly, the South Bronx is doing fairly well, with the exception perhaps of Mount Hope. But there is as many of you know, this is Washington Heights. Washington Heights, heavily foreign born, heavily non-English speaking, a lot of apartments, a lot of rentals, not very different from the population that's moved over into the West Bronx. There is a cluster of high response in Washington Heights North and South, up into Inwood, and it's come across into Van Cortlandt Village. And so we see that the kind of a pattern now that I've identified in our daily reporting, our weekly reports, that we have this cluster that's moved into the Bronx of high response, and high response into Spuyten Duyvil, up into Riverdale. Also, the concourse is doing fairly well. So interestingly, the Census Bureau, they love to tell us from the national standpoint that if you don't speak English well, if the educational attainment isn't high, if there's lower socioeconomic status, if everybody rents, you're going to be in trouble on self-response. Well, get a load of this. When you go up north, there's tons of home ownership. A lot of people speak English. There is education, there is wealth, and lo and behold, look at what's happened. It's kind of turned things on its head. This is not, it's consistent with history, to the extent that Community District 12, with its heavy Black population, has historically not done very well, okay? But, and Belmont right now is a mix of, I defy anyone to tell me, if you could ever characterize Belmont by a single group, you can't. It's a total mix. This is kind of confusing, to be honest. This area right around Parkchester. Again, it's a mix of people, and this begs for outreach, as does, Unionport, Frog's Neck. There are a whole bunch of areas in the East Bronx that are really lacking. When I see this map, I see community organization at work or not at work, but we can debate that. Now, let me show you the pressure points, the hot spots, the areas that we want to point you to as having the most serious problems. So these are response rates on the left as of May 18th, and it's the same map. It's this map, okay? What we've done though is we've said, okay, let's look at the lowest rung group, these 6 places down here, less than 44%, the places that are in trouble. But let's look and see how much they improved from the 4th to the 18th of May. In other words, the Bronx average is 4.6 percentage points. Are they catching up is the question. Which areas are accelerating, which areas are not? And you can see that 4 out of the 6 areas are losing ground, okay? We've got a tick up in Williamsbridge, Olinville, I guess you would call it. We've got a tick up in West Farms, but Belmont, Wakefield, the area just to the north of Parkchester, which goes into Westchester Square. This area in here with this cluster, I would call it Van Ness, Morris Park, into Westchester Square, and Union and Soundview Bruckner, I would call this because of its proximity to the expressway, are not. They're not catching up. They're losing ground. These are the targets for outreach, the primo targets. Now, I'm going to show you another map. It's, again, the map on the left is the same as the previous slide. Now what we've done is we've taken the bottom 2, these 12 areas that are on the bottom here, where we look at not only those that are less than 44, those that are less than 48%. There's 12 neighborhoods. When you move to the map on the right, we now have, instead of having the 6, we now have the 12 neighborhoods. And we're asking the question, how many of these have fallen behind? How many of these are in trouble? And you could see a bit of a better scenario here. Frog's Neck is at least increasing consistent with the city average. As we said earlier, Williamsbridge, Olinville is 2. Now we've got Baychester added to this and Mount Hope. Okay, these are in the bottom 2, again, categories on the map on the left, and we're moving them over to the right to see how they're doing. But again, out of this cluster around Parkchester, we've now added yet another neighborhood. We've added kind of what I would call Westchester Unionport to this mix. And we're getting into parts of Crotona Park to the west. So this band expands. This deep purple means they're losing ground, and that's what we have to worry about. Areas like in Baychester, I'm thinking the areas off of 233rd Street. And the irony is that if you look at Co-op City and you look at its composition and you go across the highway and look at the composition of Community District 12, you immediately say, what is going on? The composition of these 2 places doesn't differ that much. But what does differ is likely some sense of organization. In the article today, again in this paper called The City, they point to the tenants organizations and management and a bunch of groups pulling together based on Co-op City pride in getting them to respond. And now the Co-op is like probably the top, near the top. The other competitor is Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village. Okay. So Stuyvesant Town is and Co-op City is substantial. I'm not familiar with this function here. I approve something. Can you see my screen? Lines appear on my screen.
Yeah, there are a couple lines.
Yeah, I approved somebody to annotate, and my natural inclination is to approve when a office requests it. So okay, oh whoa, I'm supposed to annotate. Geez.
Yeah. I think on the left side there, you might be able to, or on the left or the bottom, there might be a control to take it back to just normal cursor.
Okay. Oh, thank you. That worked. I'm sorry. I apologize to whoever was there. I didn't really know what I was doing. Okay. So, all right. Let me end with this note, okay? These are the highest and lowest response rates using data that we just got, literally. You look at the rate for Co-op City, 62% above the nation, above the city, above the borough. Spuyten Duyvil, Kingsbridge, 60%, 59.8. Riverdale, 59.7. And there's Parkchester, 59. And Van Cortlandt Village, 56. The neighborhoods with the lowest response rates, and you've seen before. And again, look at the range. Go to, if you look at Williamsbridge and Olinville, 41%, and Co-op City, they are 20 points apart, okay? And they're right across the highway from each other. Well, no, that's wrong. I apologize, that's not right. They are, though, in community district, we're talking about areas adjacent to Co-op City with composition of population that doesn't differ all that much. And what's surprising to me is that one of the newest things we're seeing in Williamsbridge, in Woodlawn, Wakefield, is the emergence of a larger and larger Hispanic community, especially among Dominicans. And Dominicans tend to do very well in the census, their community organizing. But apparently it's not taking here. So what I'm trying to point out is that Co-op City obviously is doing something that other places need to somehow tap into, whether that's a practical matter in a homeowning community in a very diverse housing situation like you would have in a Wakefield or Williamsbridge or in Baychester. I'm thinking now, I'm thinking of 233rd Street again, moving to the west off of 95 versus Co-op, trying to figure out how to harness the kind of organizing they've done in Co-op. But in fairness to the people in Community District 12, Co-op has almost a built-in mechanism for messaging that is not available maybe in some other neighborhoods. And that may be the answer in Parkchester too, because Parkchester in the maps appears like an oasis amidst problems in the surrounding areas. So I'm sure I don't have to tell everyone what's at stake here in terms of the numbers. Some of the things we're seeing in the Bronx are very encouraging. The move to paper was probably a very good thing, and I credit the Census Bureau for that. On the other hand, there's a ways to go. If we can get that 50% response that we have right now up, if we can move that up, boy, will we be in good shape, because it means that we're not going to rely on the U.S. Census Bureau. Again, everyone will tell you, I have a great fondness for the Census Bureau. I work hand in hand with those people. I actually spent a year at the Census Bureau. Many years ago, I spent a year with the Census Bureau. I have very great fondness for them, but we don't want them to have to go out to our housing units. We want people to stand up and respond on their own. That'll give us the best data. It'll reduce the probability of an undercount, and it'll put us in a much better position. And the answer is, we have until the middle of August before they're going to go out, and that by itself, I think, is pretty spectacular. I think that's great. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to stop, and it's okay. Open it to questions if that's part of the agenda.
I'm going to jump in, Joseph. This is the deputy. So I'm actually coming to you from, the great Community Board 12 that we've spoken a lot about. And to be honest, this is something that causes me to scratch my head as well over not just this census, but the prior census as well, especially when you look back and see the results of certain tracks. And I think in 10 years ago, I was very naive to some of the outreach efforts, and even though we wanted folks to focus on the areas in the housing developments. And then we also saw that, but 10 years later, we saw that that's where we got some of the best numbers, and just somehow the residences around in the Williamsbridge area were just, the numbers were not there. I read that article today and about Co-op City, but interestingly enough, I think it connects very well with what you have on your heat map of like that square Parkchester, where there's the response rate is so high, so much higher than every place around it. And I think it may have something to do with congestion, that people are just right there. This is a similar demographic. If you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I see, you know, you have that demographic in Parkchester and Co-op City. They're not that far off from each other, and yet, you know, I think because there's so many buildings and they're closer to each other, it seems to affect the numbers and allow, you know, communication to be easier or better. These are just theories and things that jump off the top of my head, and it just makes me want to try to understand a little bit better about how to reach the rest of Community Board 12, which, like you're saying, is you know, demographically similar, but somehow not getting the same result. So, you know, I thank you for your presentation, because it's highlighted some of the things I think we're already thinking about.
Marika, let me comment on your the statement you made about the buildings. The previous week in our each week in our weekly report on self-response, we highlight kind of a different element of self-response. And a few weeks ago, we focused on public housing. And public housing, now the big problem in public housing has always been the number of people that are put on the questionnaire as opposed to the number of people who respond. Okay, let's put that aside for a minute. We know that there historically has been a shortage of people that are responded, that are included, excuse me, in the questionnaire. But let's put that aside for a minute. So far, what we see is public housing is doing well in general, and this is consistent with your earlier statement that maybe it's the nature of the housing, maybe it's the nature of these larger buildings where, you know, the community room is the distribution point, and people get the word out and they work the building in a way that you can't going along Eastchester Road up into Boston Road, and with all the private houses and all of the kind of lower density elements, but that you see in housing elements in those neighborhoods. And then when you get to a place like Edenwald, or you get to places like Baychester houses, and you realize they're doing fairly well. The problem is in a lot of the other areas, private home ownership is supposed to be an impetus or a motivation for people to self-respond, but it turns out that in the city, not so much, not as much as you'd expect. So our goal here is to help you mobilize and to help everyone on this call realize where the hot spots are, where the problems are, continue to do whatever we're doing, you know, up in Van Cortlandt Village and off the concourse. You see this pattern. Look at this. You know, we have a lot of African immigrants here. And if you go up to 167th Street, you know, and you get off the 4 train, and then, you know, the concourse area, this is all doing fairly well. So what's the secret here? Can we somehow bottle this and use it in some other parts of the borough?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I just think it's so important that when we're looking at these assumptions, I guess that's theories and assumptions, that we have strong numbers like that you're showing us that can either confirm what we think we know, or cause us to recalibrate a little bit. And I think, the numbers that we are seeing, we obviously want to bring out the communities that have been undercounted traditionally. And we're looking to make sure that happens. So I don't want to dominate this part of the conversation. Actually, I don't want to dominate any part of the conversation. But are there any hands that raised for questions for Mr. Salvo? I saw something on chat that just came up and went away. Chris, can you?
Yeah, so there's a couple that are raised. And again, for anybody who is only connected by phone, if you want to raise your hand, hit *9 on your phone. You'll hear a message that says your hand has been raised, and then we can see that you want to ask the question. But we do have a couple, so I'll just go down the list. So we have Bob has his hand raised. His line's unmuted, so go ahead, Bob.
Sure. Hi, Joe. It's Bob Kaplan. As always, incredible presentation and in-depth understanding. Let me ask two questions. You always talk about the churning of communities, and I'm wondering if Co-op City and Parkchester and some of the other areas that have higher response rates have less of a churning or less fluidity in the populations changing over a period of time that refer to a classic structure of organization in the area, such as what happens in Co-op City or Parkchester. And B, since we're in the COVID crisis and in many cases, what we would have considered classic structures such as houses of worship in certain areas are no longer points of reference quite in the same way, can we begin to look at or begin to understand what have become the points of reference in a community? I know that in many communities that I'm dealing with around the city, things have shifted to more hyper-local points of reference and different points of reference, and for us to quickly begin to understand what those might be.
Okay. On the mobility issue, certainly there is some mobility in and around, in co-op. But co-op, as you know, is co-op in Co-op City, and that is a form of ownership. And the article this morning, I think, touched upon community pride and surrounding the fact that people have a stake in that community. I do not think we have the churning in Co-op City that we have in a number of developments. I'm sorry, that's wrong. In a number of neighborhoods throughout the city. If you take a look at some developments, you'll generally see that there is some dynamism, some mobility, but it can't compete with many of the big neighborhoods. With many of the neighborhoods that experience a constant, relatively constant churning of people. So I would agree that I think that there are a lot of long-standing residents in co-op, and that support the census effort in a way that is really true to the community. And maybe that's a way of reinforcing it. Now, in terms of maybe in other places, that's a way of reinforcing it. And then regarding houses of worship, I agree, but it depends on the neighborhood. There are some areas of Brooklyn that are just incredible in terms of their reference points of worship. And you know that better than me. And yet they somehow it doesn't resonate, and it varies by neighborhood. I would say, what points of reference do we have? Community organizations that are providing services, are providing a link between the people in the community, and much needed services, I think increasingly are very important, especially surrounding health and social services. And in some cases that crosses with houses of worship. But it's so neighborhood dependent or neighborhood specific that I think it's very hard to generalize. Like in Community District 12, I would imagine there are um, um, and there are places, houses of worship that might be able to get the message across. The question is, in the absence of congregation, I'm sorry, in the absence of collective, expressions of worship, that's obviously an issue of how people are bonding in this time of where we can no longer, we can't go to church or we can't go to temple or whatever. Anyway, so that.
All right, so we have a question from somebody who's on the phone. If you could please identify yourself, I'll unmute that line now. It's the number that includes 509.
Hi, folks. This is Destiny Cruz calling from the office of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. So I dialed in a little late, but I heard Parkchester is doing really well. What exactly was that percentage again?
Actually, I had it up on the screen. The Parkchester is like 59. It's just about, yeah, it's 59%.
That's
Response,
amazing.
which is right around the national average is barely 60. So, Parkchester's up there and well above the city average, which is just about 50.
That's amazing. And because I am dialed in on the phone, I didn't get a chance to see all of the visuals. Will you be sending that out to the elected officials, or is that something we request from you directly?
Well, I'd ask Tracy if she could distribute it. That would be great. You're certainly welcome to do that. And if you guys have any questions, and as a constituent, I can tell you if you guys have any questions, just let me know. But even if I wasn't a constituent, I would I'd still be happy to answer your questions. Let me point out something about Parkchester that's fascinating. Parkchester is, again, I'm probably not telling you guys anything you don't know, has experienced a big influx of Bangladeshi population. The South Asian in Parkchester has really blossomed. So going back to what Bob Kaplan said earlier, maybe this South Asian Muslim population is somehow bonding together. Maybe the mosques are indeed a focal point of response in a way that right now I'm just guessing that because the truth is I really don't know from a community organizing standpoint whether that's true, but it's obviously making some sort of a difference in the area. Obviously, there's been substantial change in that regard. But Parkchester, I agree, is like Co-op. You're talking about a plurality of Black population mixed in with Hispanics and now South Asians in a really interesting way, but they're bonding somehow around the message. In Co-op and in Parkchester and in Van Cortlandt Village, they are coalescing around the message, and got to tap that. Thank you for your question.
Absolutely, and thank you for the work that you do.
The caller, can you, obviously received the invitation through our Complete the Count email. If you send your information over, we'll make sure. In fact, anyone who's interested in getting slides from Mr. Salvo's presentation, please reply back to the invitation from the Complete the Count Committee, and then we'll make sure we get that information out to you as soon as possible. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have several more. The user BX05, I think that's Ken Brown. If I have it correct, I'll unmute his line. Please correct me if I had the name wrong.
Pleasure. This is Ken from Bronx Community Board 5. Pleasure to see everyone. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to know two things, please. Both during the lockdown and prior to the lockdown, was there any efforts able to be conducted at the libraries? What were the results on that? And have you seen any outreach conducted through the libraries since the lockdown? Um, yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, as you guys know, that began in March, and there was a um, uh, essentially libraries closed. But up until then, one of the big problems we have is that libraries were supposed to be a major mechanism for not only outreach, but for actually bringing in people to be enumerated. Librarians were being trained. In the case of the Bronx, the New York Public was doing training of librarians to have them serve as conduits with the visitors. And as many of you know, libraries are the first line for many new immigrants. And it's the kind of an institution that they can relate to, especially through their children. And that was all essentially nullified by the lockdown. There was nothing occurring. And that frightened a lot of us because it meant essentially that we lost one major leg of this whole effort. And social media and phone banking and texting can only carry you so far. We are operating. And let me say this. I'm glad you raised this question. Here's why. It is amazing that New York City is even at the level that it's at. You have to think about that. It is amazing that 62% of housing units in Co-op City have responded. In the midst of a pandemic, the nation's numbers, you could see, are one thing. Okay, if the nation says, that about 60% have responded, but the nation has not gone through at anywhere near the intensity. Obviously, there are certain parts of the nation that have gone through it, but the nation overall, okay, when you take a look at what's happened in New York City, frankly, it's amazing. That we've gotten a response that we've gotten. I'm not saying that it's going to carry the day because we have to keep pressing, but considering the libraries were taken offline, all physical forms of questionnaire assistance stopped. You could not have rallies. You could not have any gatherings of people, but yet the numbers are still 82, 81% of the nation. Considering what we've been through, it is amazing. Now, having said that, at some point, already, Bob Kaplan can probably speak to this, other people have told me there are already strategies that people are thinking about involving plexiglass, involving, of course, masks, where people are going to physically be out over the next few months, probably before the August 15th beginning of NRFU, of non-response follow-up. That is a very important period. That period of time when there may actually be some form of distancing, contact with social, given social distancing, there will be some contact with people where there will be some effort, perhaps in some houses of worship, to reach out to people. And that could make all the difference and boost these rates even higher, decreasing our reliance on the U.S. Census Bureau to count us. That is what this matters. That's what matters here. We want to do as much of this on our own as we can.
So Joe, let me actually comment on that, because right now the House of Worship, and I'm going to be on a number of calls over the next couple of days talking about this with government officials, don't have enough guidelines to figure out how they're going to reopen. And that's trying to be figured out right now. I think the trick is going to be, once they have learned the, I guess it's the pathway or the roadmap to reopening, is to then ensure that when they do reopen, that the census is placed on their list of priorities. Right now, houses of worship main priority is going to be reopening and understanding the reopening process and all the various complexities that are going into it, like plexiglass, because just as a point of reference, we found out that singing actually is a very highly problematic issue because it sends the droplets 3 or 4 times further than normal talking. Preaching is a very similar type of thing. So there's going to be lots of complexity. So it's going to be really important for those of you who are involved in houses of worship to ensure that as these plans for reopening are being drawn up and roadmaps are being created, that amongst the priorities for folks as they do will be the issue of the census.
All right, Deputy.
Yeah, any more questions?
Yeah, we still have several more. Just going down the list. E Cuesta, sorry, I don't have the full name there and the username, but I'm unmuting the line. If you just
Thank you very much. This is Eddie Cuesta. Joe, congratulations. Thank you for such a wonderful, presentation. This really gives us a view of really the areas that we have to concentrate. I just was wondering, looking at the map that you show with the internet desert and the areas that have had so many new housing, like West Farms and Bronx River, you have had in the last maybe few years a lot of people moving into all this new development. Can you elaborate in terms of how, in terms, I know you have mentioned in one of the previous presentations several months ago, that all of this housing had been, contemplated within the city planning. Is there a problem in those areas that they don't have the internet, that there is anything that we can do in terms of maybe promoting more through the phone process to see how they could be responsive?
We don't have evidence right now that one of the things we're looking into is whether tracks in the city differ substantially by the kind of housing that they have. Obviously, there are neighborhoods in the city where there's a lot of small multifamily buildings that have been subdivided. There's some of that certainly in the Bronx, and we expect that can dampen response. But as you mentioned, all of the new housing, upwards of 70 or 80,000 units, we added in the last hours, so to speak, before the enumeration. We made sure that it made it onto the list. All right. The good news is that we have no reason to believe that has at this point been a problem in terms of response. When you take a look and you drill down at specific parts of the city, and in the case of the Bronx, I don't want to pretend that I can know exactly every street that bounds these tracks. But when you take a look at the area, you were talking about, which would be in the range here, it is possible for you as a person who's done really good outreach over the years to zoom in on some of these areas. For example, down in here, and I would call this kind of maybe I'm thinking about West Farms. I'm thinking about Crotona Park East, something like that in here. And looking at response rates, looking at outreach in these areas and focusing in on these neighborhoods specifically. And you could see for yourself whether there's been a new development that perhaps has been, somehow either overlooked or where people are not responding. I don't believe that there's you can characterize new buildings as having problems with internet. I don't know the answer to that question right now. But in general, the Bronx has been identified as needing more paper because of a lack of internet, and actually because of a lack of response to the American Community Survey via the internet. No, the ACS, and many of you have received it perhaps, is the long questionnaire, which tells us all about those deep and interesting characteristics. And when you get that questionnaire, you're offered to respond by paper or by actually they ask you to go to the internet, and then if that fails, you can actually you can actually have a paper form. But if people are picking the paper forms that disproportionately, then that would be a target for the Census Bureau. Be a point of data for the Bureau. So Eddie, I want to thank you, for the work that you do, because I think a lot of what's going on the western ridge of the Bronx has to do with the outreach to the continuously emerging Dominican community, as well as the other communities in these neighborhoods. Again, if you pull somebody out of Washington and you said to them that these are the highest response areas, their model would never tell you that.
Yes.
That's why we're special. And so we've said that since day one. Also, I want you to notice, look at the Belmont areas. Everybody see watching me? I'm sorry about the people on the phone, but if you want to make a note about this, you can see it for yourself. You see my guesses, and I'm just guessing right now that this is like 183rd Street. Hard to do on a map without street names. And this is probably Belmont proper. And this is Fordham University up in here. This is probably Belmont proper. This area in here to the south is heavily Hispanic, but other emerging groups. Something's going on in here. And this map gives you the ability to zoom in. Up north, you see it's just a wall of resistance. Okay, the exception here would be Norwood, but other than that, it's a wall of resistance.
That's the area that we have to really attack.
I'm sorry?
That's the area that we really have to attack, because I mean, you mentioned the Wakefield, and I mean, and Woodlawn, that there's been a large increase of Hispanic population as well from West Indies, Caribbean, which is an important community for us to do an outreach.
Yeah, this is White Plains Road. There's a lot of public housing. The public housing is only part of it, and they're doing fairly well. Does anybody want to guess where the most difficult public housing project is in the city in terms of response? Let me give you guys 5 guesses, and how about the North Shore of Staten Island? There's a housing project that's just been really problematic, and the other housing projects that have been problematic are in the Ocean Hill, Brownsville area of Brooklyn. None in the Bronx that really stand out. And of course, up here we have Edenwald and a bunch of other Baychester houses. By the way, this in here is, I believe, Seton. Is it Seton Halls Park? This is actually a high response tract, but in here, that's actually a park. And I've asked my staff to identify this little kernel in Co-op that's apparently pushing back, but I'm sure Co-op already knows that. Co-op City, for those of you who don't know, historically has been only 2 census tracts. This area here, this is the Hutchinson River Parkway, and this section here. We've been unable to subdivide this area because there are no through streets. They're cul-de-sacs. But Co-op City has now been subdivided in the next census into a series of census tracts based on the paths that have been digitized by us for the Census Bureau. So Co-op's going to actually have a lot of data subdivided by where you are in what we called a super block. No longer the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ed.
All right, we've still got several more questions. There's a question that was in the chat from Cecil K. Brooks, Jr. I can unmute that line if you want to ask that question now. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Someone already touched upon my question based on the Parkchester area, but I attended another task force meeting yesterday with the Asian American Federation, and an interesting finding they had was that there's 2 really high hotspots for low responses in the Bronx area, both Parkchester and Soundview. or the model UN communities, as you said earlier, John. I know Parkchester has been covered, but I was curious about your thoughts on general strategies or trends that you might have noticed with high Asian populations in the Bronx, especially since that's the elephant in the room that a lot of people might have noticed, but not really done much study or observation into.
Well, you know, historically that the um, that the Asian representation in the Bronx has not been very nearly as high as it is in the other boroughs. Okay, and for that reason, the populations kind of get subsumed because even with high rates, which we suspect there are among several Asian groups, um, uh, even with high rates of compliance, they just don't show up because the numbers are too small. Uh, but that Parkchester is now becoming an exception, as is places like City Island and areas all along that corridor that I would characterize by the Waters Place, health facilities that would tend to draw in, for example, nurses that might be Asian, might be Filipino. For the longest time, there has been a bit of a Filipino community in Parkchester, the areas, I'm sorry, adjacent to Parkchester. Not really, it's really more Castle Hill. But again, the numbers are just not that large enough. Parkchester is proving to be an exception in the sense that the Bangladeshi movement in there has been big and been substantial. Also, we're noticing in some parts of Clawson Point and Soundview, we're starting to see similar things occur. Now, if you'll notice, the square here that is Parkchester, you see the areas colored in white are very high, but you see there's a tract in here that's more a bit on the lower end. Perhaps that's what I guess Howard Shee was presenting. Is that the person who was presenting yesterday? The Federation.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Howard. Yeah, Howard and I have been talking a lot because you can't look at the Asian community from the neighborhood tabulation area standpoint outside of some parts of Queens and maybe a few parts of Brooklyn. Because again, they're 14% of the pop. And when they get to 30 or 40%, it's really cool. When it gets to 30 or 40%, that's a lot for the Asian pop, but it's still 60% of the people are not Asian. And remember, I cannot tell you who in Parkchester is responding. I can only speculate because we don't have data on the group responses within a neighborhood. Okay. So I can't tell you whether this snippet might be low for Bangladeshis or not. I can't tell you that. Um, let me just say this. Friday's report, the one we're going to be issuing this Friday, we're going to have our special feature is going to be on the Asian community. All right. So perhaps in that report, we'll be able to comment, having zoomed in more closely on the community. But there are definite problems, from what I understand, in Queens and in Brooklyn with the messaging for different Asian communities, because there are so many, for example, in Queens and in Brooklyn, so many different types of Asian community. About half the Asians in the city are Chinese, but the other half are very tremendously. All you got to do is go to Skillman Avenue and Woodside or Sunnyside and take a look, and you just have all kinds of different groups from Asia. So I apologize, Cecil, if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, A, and B, if that's the best I can do with your question.
Right, and a quick follow-up. I know you mentioned associations or organizations as a big part of a strategy that has worked well. What has that looked like for you in neighborhoods throughout the Bronx where there might not be as strong institutions? Particularly, I'm asking about the South Bronx as a community board one member in Mott Haven. Does that look like more nonprofits giving services or more tenants' rights organizations?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I think there are people on this call who are much better able to answer this question. I don't feel qualified to answer it. All I can tell you is something's working in a big chunk of the South Bronx and in the West Bronx. Something is working that is not found in other places. And remember, you can subdivide these NTAs by tract, and you can figure out, just using this map and a Hagstrom, where it is that these clusters of low response, where the hot spots are, and then approach it that way. But somebody's doing something right on the concourse. Okay.
But for clarification, Joseph, sorry, you were thinking or referring to tenant organizations in places like Co-op City?
There's no question that tenant organizations are influential in public housing projects because, like I said, public housing is generally doing well. In Co-op City, maybe this is what was referred to earlier. We have to think about is it possible to mimic that kind of organization for Olinville or Williamsbridge or Wakefield? There are a lot of big buildings. I want to point out something on this map. This is White Plains Road, okay? There's a lot of public housing along White Plains Road, and public housing has generally been doing well. What is going on here that's producing these low rates? I have to tell you, I would venture to say that if I look at a map of public housing up in here, these are going to be public housing tracts. They're doing better, but still doing better than areas to the east, where you have a lot more homeowning going on. But the homeowners are not responding, and it's got to be a combination of people, of organizations in public housing combined with the homeowners to try to break through in what amounts to a big chunk of Community District 12. Thank you.
All right, we've got 3 more questions, if that's all right. The next of which is Jeffrey Weiss, sorry for mispronouncing there perhaps, but Jeffrey, your line's unmuted, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
Let's try that again. We heard you for a second. I'll unmute again. I think you may have also clicked, but.
Yeah, I did not have a question, but I'll say hello to Joe and I'll pass. Sorry.
That's okay. Julio Rivera is next. I'm unmuting your line, so go ahead, Julio.
Thanks. Hey, everyone. Julio Rivera with Menlo Educational Fund. Joe, just out of curiosity, I've seen that the Census Bureau was releasing the response rates based on census tract and city, but I hadn't seen it based on neighborhood level. Is that something that they're releasing, or could you speak about how you came to those numbers?
We create the NTA picture you're looking at. The NTAs are something that we create by aggregating census tracts. It takes some creative moves to do this because, as you know, the geography that they're using is a little different from what we normally use for census tracts. It is our geography, our neighborhood-based geography. So indeed, we do that. Now, as part of our weekly reports, again, issued every Friday, and I send it to Tracy, and Tracy, please distribute as you feel appropriate. Like I said in the email, we are now including an appendix which has the rates going back generally for 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks for every NTA in the city. So we're making the full data set now available to everyone who wants to use it. And the reason we do this is because, frankly, in some places, like Howard Shee will tell you that for the Asian population, it can be very difficult to generalize for an entire NTA. But for the most part, and so you have to go to census tracts, but for the most part, what's going on up in Wakefield, okay, what's going on, in, again, Williamsbridge, Olinville, or what's going on in the West Farms area here, you can generally use the NTA data to gain a sense of what you need to do, in the case of Belmont, for example, without having to go to tracts because people don't relate to tracts. But if you say to people that you need to go to Belmont and get the word out, generally It's not, right now, it's not door to door. It's not likely that the opportunity for door to door is going to be that substantial, but the opportunity for events to be held, let's say, off of Arthur Avenue in Belmont, that's something you need to look into. And this helps you target, and especially the maps that we show later on. We're also showing these now as part of our regular feature. The idea that low response areas, are they catching up? Are we making a difference? For example, in Queens, there's a targeted effort of the Guyanese community in Richmond Hill. Over time, is Richmond Hill getting better? Is your messaging working? So this allows you, as you go from week to week, to track that. And now what I'm saying is we have up until August 15th before the Bureau's going out to get self-response rates up. And the higher the self-response rate, the lower the probability of an undercount.
All right, so we've got one more question, as far as I can see. Sonia Lee, I'm unmuting your line.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sonia Lee. I'm a director of programs with the Witness to Mass Incarceration, and we're working for all 5 boroughs. I have 2 questions. The first question is, I just saw one of the slides that compared the top 5 neighborhoods with the worst 5 neighborhoods, and I was wondering, is there any way for us to somehow learn what's working in the top 5 neighborhoods and share it so that we could use the learnings from them for other, the worst neighborhoods? I understand it's going to be difficult to have a formal, research or study which is, database, but even if it's anecdotal information that could be of help, might be something that might be a great idea just to share amongst the people like us who are interested in ensuring that our hard-to-count communities are included in the census. That's number 1 question. I have number 2 question I can ask afterwards or right now, whatever you think is.
Okay, let me just answer your first question. Let me tell you why I'm here today. Why I'm here today is to first and foremost to help the borough president and organizations that are represented on this call to indeed coalesce, come together, and figure out what's going on in these top 5, we'll have the top 10 in Friday's report. You can have the whole Bronx in Friday's report. Actually, from the May 18th report, I'm sorry, wrong, that's May 14th report. You have all of the rates for the Bronx. To actually assign, if I were, I'm sorry, I'm being presumptuous. I apologize, but I'm going to do it anyway. If I were the BP, I would assign somebody the task, or 2 people, the task of talking to the key groups in each of these 5 places and finding out, first of all, I don't know who is and who is not responding in Parkchester. Is the success occurring in Parkchester proper? I would think perhaps yes. Is it tenants groups? How are you getting the word out? And here's the big one. What messages are you using? Okay. It's going to hurt you personally that you don't answer the census. That service that you rely on is going to go away. Is that the strategy? What kinds of messages are they delivering? And how are they delivering them? I would assign somebody to look into this, to meet. My God, the borough president knows better than any other office in the Bronx, in my opinion, just like in Queens and the other boroughs, who's doing what where, and finding out systematically what is going on in these places. We have a little time to do this. And like I said, the Census Bureau is not going to knock on doors till August 15th. They're not even going to mobilize the area census offices until June. Sounds so far away, right? I just realized it's May 20th. Okay. So they're not going to be mobilizing till not even starting the mobilization till August 15th. They're not going to be knocking on doors. So we have enough time to do this. So that would be my response. That is my response. Excuse me.
So essentially what I heard you say is basically this exercise of getting together today is trying to come up with ideas to help find ways to extract this learning and share it with everybody else, right?
Yes, Sonia, yes.
Perfect. My second question was, I think you made a very important point there. I guess it's not about you or me or anybody. It's all of us working together and trying to find the best way to make it happen. And the people on the ground are the best ones who could do this job. My second question was regarding the fact that you mentioned something about August 31st or 15th. I don't remember when the census enumerators go out. And you mentioned that before they go out, that's the best chance for us to do whatever we need to do. I'm curious, why do you have to say before the census workers go out? Does it mean once they go out, we become irrelevant, or we cannot do what we want to do, or is there any other reason?
Sonia, I am so glad you asked that question because, sometimes when you say something, you don't realize exactly how others are reading it. I am not in any way, shape, or form discouraging outreach past August. I think we're going to need to do outreach through the end of October. The census ends October 31st, okay? And outreach needs to be continuous from now all the way through that point in time, because the Census Bureau is going to have a lot of doors slammed in their faces. And getting people to answer by way of a census enumerator is very, very important. What I keep saying, though, is if you want to minimize the potential for undercount, you get people to respond on their own. Because right now, the only way to respond is on your own. When the Census Bureau starts to go out in August 15th, we certainly want to continue with outreach. We should not stop outreach. It's got to continue through this entire period, because when they start knocking on doors, people are going to be very suspicious. There are going to be people who are going to be upset. I don't know what protocols the Bureau is going to have to follow. There are going to be people with masks coming to your door. Are you going to respond? See, that's going to scare people. And honestly, we don't know which way the pandemic, hope to God, is settling down, and that we go through a period where the declines continue and we move away from this horrible time. But the fact of the matter is we don't know where we're going to be in August. And you're going to need to convince people that it is in our interest for them to answer the Census Bureau when they come knocking. We prefer, though, that they not come and knock, and the way to stop them is to answer on your own. So maybe that's the most powerful message, huh?
I guess I'm just wondering, in a time like this, when imagine having somebody knock at your door who happens to be a stranger carrying some sort of a clipboard or something in hand, and having a mask on, it's going to be very scary as it is. So you might as well have somebody, a known person with a mask on, rather than an unknown person with a mask on knocking on your door, right?
No, a part of the NYC 2020 initiative is to indeed do that. I suspect there are going to be people who are going to be going out, maybe not knocking on individual doors, but certainly canvassing neighborhoods and talking to people about the importance of responding. But there actually has been, if rates in the neighborhoods that are not responding continue to be low, then you bet I think there are going to be people going out who are known to the community, okay, to try to temper frustration and try to better, get response rates up. Thank you, though, Sonia. That was good. I didn't want to get that message. I didn't want anybody to misunderstand what I was saying. Thank you.
All right, so that is all the questions for Joe. Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you to keep the agenda moving. Joe, you can stop sharing your screen whenever you're ready to do that. Thank you very much. I saw there was one more question in the chat about distributing the report. Certainly, Tracy can email it out, and whether or not it'll be posted anywhere else, we can let you know, but Tracy can make that call. So anybody who wants that report, just make sure to get in touch with her. Her email address, you should have it from the meeting, but if not, it's posted on the contact page of our website. That's the easiest way, rather than spelling things out. Deputy, if you want to take over.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thank you so much. Of course, while that was a lot of good information and a lot of data, which I think through that, as census advocates, we have to really rely on the data and lean on it for our next steps in terms of where we need to go and where we need to target whatever we're doing in terms of our research. So again, thank you, Joe, for that information. I think we want to move a little more quickly, but certainly want to continue with that depth of information. We have Kathleen Daniel. She's the field director for New York City Census 2020, giving us a New York City census update. And again, without further ado, we'll bring on Kathleen to bring us some information on citywide. Kathleen?
Good morning. It's so great to be back in the Boogie Down Bronx without having to get on traffic.
What's going on with the hair?
Well, no salons are open, so I apologize. This is as good as it gets. You're wearing it well. I'm struggling right now. So I also have our Bronx Borough lead, Josh Peacock. If we can unmute him. Josh has been here all morning waiting patiently. Josh, are you unmuted?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to let Josh start off and give you some information, and then I'm going to give you some information. Of course, I'm an organizer. I got to ask you for some help. Josh, all yours.
Yes. Yep. So I'm pulling out my notes right now. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be back. I hope everyone's staying safe out there. So I just want to give you a few updates because I know that I had mentioned our phone banks. And so I just want to give you a little bit more detailed information on that. So currently right now we have our WhatsApp and other our social media into 15 different languages. And I'm going to list the languages for you. It is Albanian, Arabic, Bangla, Chinese Simplified, French, Hindi, Korean, Creole, Nepali, Punjabi, Russian, Spanish, Urdu, Vietnamese, and Yiddish. And so we've set up WhatsApp, pretty much a WhatsApp channel for each one of these languages, and we'll be pushing out our social media. So social media postings, and simply what we would ask you is that you join these groups, push out the social media into your different channels and your networks, and then just really push out the emphasis on filling out the census. We're also setting up, we also have phone banks set up. So we have phone banks in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. And so we have actually our phone scripts translated into those languages. We're in the process of translating our phone scripts into Urdu, Hindi, Yiddish, Punjabi, Creole, and Haitian Creole. So we're working on that. And also, I mentioned this last week, but everyone knows that. So currently, we've reached out to 3 million New Yorkers just through our 2 past texting campaigns. And so we're really proud of that number because we've had volunteers along with just a whole bunch of community members calling out to the community. And we think that's really been helping the Bronx especially. And then finally, next Wednesday, we're going to do our first knock convening. It's going to be taking place from 5 to 6 p.m. And I will send you more information about that as well. And then now I will kick it over to Kathleen, who will talk about more about what we're doing.
So I hate to follow the inimitable Joe Salvo because, my God, what else is there left to say, right? Joe is amazing. Major snaps for Joe. So let's talk about what we're doing. We heard some numbers. We heard some great numbers, some scary numbers, right? And Bronx, your boogie down, your boogie is not broke down because you're not the bottom of the heap in terms of our 5 boroughs, right? But I can't give you 2 snaps for that because New York City's average right now is 49% of us have self-responded. And that means, yay, we're almost halfway there. But that also means we're only almost halfway there, right? And so we've got to get to work. So I was loving the Q&A because what we have done, we took some of the top 25 and are examining exactly what people have done, who's assigned to those turfs between awardees, what houses of worship are there, our staff, community partners, community boards, and we're pulling together by neighborhood our NOCs, which are our neighborhood organizing census committees, and we're creating kind of like a neighborhood strike team when we're calling them our neighborhood response strategic teams, so that we can examine what's working and then examine what is not working in specific areas. Like in Brooklyn, we've got a challenge in Borough Park. We have some challenges in terms of different cultures and communities that we're seeing why that there's a low self-response. Believe it or not, the neighborhoods doing worst in the city are Manhattan, on the Upper West Sides, right? People that left the city in the midst of the pandemic, but they didn't do the census form before they left. And so we're working with community groups in that area, like the Junior League and others, to do some relational organizing, which I'll talk to you about next, so that we can get through to people that, hey, whether or not you're in the city, if you live in the city, fill in the census form and do it for where you are. And we should consider that when we're looking as well at low income areas, because I know there are many people that sheltered in place where their parents are, so they can provide care for the elderly, where children, blended families have all sheltered in place together, because otherwise the children will not see the other parent for some time. And I think that we should be, in our conversations, as we're going through community by community, we should examine some of this, because some people are literally not home where they normally would be. That said, so one of the things we're doing are phone banks. We can't knock on doors, but we can certainly call phones. And there is nothing like direct person-to-person contact to get the census done. We've texted almost 3 million people, and now we're calling through millions and millions of people. Last week, in one day, we called 9,000 people, and we need your help to do that. We need your help for bilingual phone banks, where we're calling into a neighborhood, perhaps where we know that there's a large percentage of Latinx people. So we need English, Spanish bilingual people. In some areas where we're seeing there's a large Haitian population, we need bilingual people so that you can speak to the people that speak English. But then if we need to switch and do that code switch, we can do that right away. And our phone banks are done two ways. There is the virtual phone bank where you are using your phone, and we encourage people to get a free Google Voice number. We can teach you how to do that. And you are calling in the comfort of your home, of course, it's virtual, and there is no minimum number of people to participate in that with us. And you call New Yorkers, you read a script, you ask them, you tell them how important it is, ask them if they've done the census, etc. And you tell them how to get resources, how to get it done. There is also the predictive dialer phone bank, which is a lot of fun because you don't dial the phone. You're using your own phone, but your phone number is blocked. And it comes up as a New York City NYC Census employee's phone number. So people are seeing a real number. It doesn't say restricted, because who answers those, right? I barely answer them. And you can then sit, you log in, we give you a quick training. You log in, you dial a phone number, and then you wait for a beep. And when you get the beep, you start to speak to another New Yorker live. And here's not only do we teach you how to walk them through going online and getting it done, but you can also just patch them through and connect them on the phone to the Federal Census Bureau. And through that, we're getting a lot of people to complete the census. So don't just talk to them. Don't just talk about it. We can help them be about it and get the thing done. Also, we have an amazing social media campaign that we have spliced in many different languages. Right now, we just approved the artwork for some social media bots or images and graphics for Eid, because that is an iftar is coming up very soon. So we've got toolkits for you in a number of ways and ranges. So you can just reach out to us, and you can do that through Tracy, or I'm going to post in the chat. My email address is kadaniel@census.nyc.gov. I'll post it in the chat. You can go to our website to get involved and sign up for a phone bank. We have one today. We have one tomorrow. We have one on Friday. And Friday, I'm leading that phone bank with Predictive Dialer, and we do that in a group. So for Predictive Dialer, because it's dialing for you, we ask that there be no less than 20 people in a group at a time. And so if your group, your club, your Bronx Complete Count Committee wants to set up for Predictive Dial, Josh or I can set you up at a date and time that is convenient for you. We just ask that there are no less than 20 people, and that you stay logged on for the amount of time that you decided you're going to phone bank for, so that the dialer can predict and you're not sitting and waiting for it to dial. right? So that's how we keep the system going and going quickly so we can talk to as many New Yorkers as possible in a short period of time and patch them through to the census or walk them through getting it done online. So this Friday from 1 to 3, we're doing a Pan-African predictive dialer. So we're calling communities that are historically undercounted, African-American, Afro-Caribbean, and African, and we're having similar voices on the phone speaking to them about getting the census done. And the script is a little tweaked because we know that in historically undercounted communities, there are trust issues. There are concerns about documentation and immigration. And so we have a specific script for that group, for that culture. So we hope that you join us, and you can go on our website, nyc.gov/census, and you can sign up, or you can tell Tracy you want to sign up. She's awesome at communication, the queen of follow-up. You can email me or Josh, and I'm KADANIEL@census.nyc.gov. Additionally, we are going to be doing this not convening that Josh talked to you about, and giving very specific updates and talking about our relational organizing. Now, a lot of people are calling through their databases and their lists. We're calling everybody we know and checking on them, right? A lot of us are even calling people we used to know and went to school with. No judgment, you can call your exes as well, right? We need to call everybody and see where everybody is and how they're doing in this pandemic. But while you're doing that, you need to talk to them about how to pave the pathway to recovery through participation in the census. A lot of the areas that are highest in COVID cases and COVID death fatalities are low and among the lowest in census self-response. So when you're calling people, check on them, see how they're doing, and then tell them the best thing, the healthiest thing they can do for their neighborhood and for New York City is to participate in the census. So we're going to launch our phone trees. We've got a toolkit for you. We have a script for you, and we're encouraging you to track and sit down, give yourself half an hour, and call through people in your phone, text them. We have images that you can send them where they can click and go right to the my2020census.gov website so that they can get it done. Because as hard as I try, and I can talk to everybody, but they don't know me, they know you. Call your parents, your friends, even if you think they did it already, because you'd be surprised how many people know all about it because they know you and they still didn't just do the thing. So let's help them do the thing and get it done. The world is watching. We thought in New York City that we were the center of the universe, and then we became the epicenter, right? And so the world is watching, and we need to show the world how New York City, how the boogie down gets down and responds to a crisis, how we get it done. And we're almost halfway there. We can get all the way there. We've got something that never happens. We've got a little more time, and we can use that wisely. So if you want to get involved, if I haven't convinced you yet, get involved. Get online, nyc.gov/census, and join us for a phone bank. We've got millions of people to call, and they need to hear from you.
All right. I love that energy. I mean, Kathleen just made me want to put on my sneakers and run outside and ask somebody to do the census. Yes. Amen. That was a sermon and a half. You have a second calling if when the census thing is over, you have another calling perhaps to the pulpit, because you really just brought energy to us folks who are just sort of a little bit downtrodden in our efforts. So we thank you for that. But as I say that, do we have any questions for our folks from NYC Census 2020? One of the things as Chris gathers the hands raised, I think that the city itself and what we're trying to do is like best practices. So what I hear you saying is you're talking about phone banking, and you're talking about the contacts that you're making, the knocks and all of that. Are there any other best practices that you can share that have shown to be fruitful for you and the folks that you're working with at Census 2020?
So and that's a great question. Thank you. So one of the things that we're seeing that is working well is relational organizing, is talking to people that you know, that you've ever met, that have some familiarity with you because you're in their phone and they're in yours. So we're finding talking to the people that you know in some way, and that means hitting them up on Facebook, right, and tagging them. I get a lot of attention, not only when I tag people, but then others text me or inbox me and say, you just tag shamed me because how come you didn't tag me about the census, right? So the more you do that, the more you're posting and tagging people, that has, Susie, been working, because then once they respond, I'm hitting them with that website and I'm hitting them with the phone number. And that phone number, 844-330-2020. It's open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 2 a.m. So people can call. And in the past, there were some wait times, but you can call that main line for English, and they can patch you through to 12 other languages. So that's awesome. Something else that we're seeing that is working well are Dear Neighbor letters. So people are just sending a note in their building, posting something in the laundry room in their community or at the laundromat from them. And it's a letter, it's in our relational toolkit. And it's really saying, dear neighbor, I'm such and such in 12B, or I'm such and such from the Block Association. Really need you to know, and we give you the numbers for your community. And I should mention that when we phone bank, we can phone bank specific neighborhoods. We can cluster neighborhoods. So that area in the North Bronx where Joe is showing you that we've got a cluster situation there, right? We can phone bank right into those areas. We can phone bank by pulling all the areas, all the neighborhoods that are Latinx for bilingual. We can dial, and right now, I've got a heart for seniors in my family. There are a lot of elders, and the elders are transitioning to ancestors because of COVID, right? And so we can also splice our list by age, and we can call our elders and walk them through or patch them through and help them get it done, so they know it's not a scam, so they know it's us, it's New York City, neighbor to neighbor, and we're getting that done. So we're seeing a lot of the direct contact, the neighbor letters, and then people are doing some fun things online and DJing and getting people together so that you can have an audience and talk about the census. So every prayer group I'm logging into, every meeting, every PTA, I tell people, you know what? I don't know if I can stay in this meeting. How many of you did the census? And the ones that didn't, I put the website link right in the chat. And I only say I'm going to stay in the meeting or I will never come back if they don't all just get it done. So everything you do, everywhere you go, preach the gospel of the census.
You tell us, where can we get that toolkit you just mentioned?
So we are launching it, and it will be on our website next week, but the Boogie Down does not have to wait. We can get that to you. Send me an email at kadaniel@census.nyc.gov, and Josh and I will get that right out to you by the end of this week.
Okay, awesome. Chris, do we have any hands raised? Any questions?
So not yet, not at the moment. There are still a few hands that were raised from the first round of questions. So I would just ask folks who, if you're on WebEx, you can unraise your hand by clicking on that same button, the little hand in the bottom right. If you're on a phone, you hit *9, it would unraise your hand. So the only hands that are raised to ask questions right now are 4 that were raised continuously from the first round of Q&A. So I don't know that anybody has any questions specifically right now.
Okay, so Kathleen, you're going to stay on with us for a little while? Okay, wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll give everybody the instructions of how to take their hands down again, and then we will go ahead and move to our next speaker, and we'll allow everyone to take their hands down. And if they truly have a question, they can put their hands back up. And if they have a question for our next speaker, they can again put their hands up for that speaker for that call. So what are we going to do? We're going to put our hands down. And how do we do that, Chris?
Well, 2 already did, so that's good. There's two. If you're on, both are on WebEx. So in the participants list at the bottom right, the same spot that you clicked to put your hand up, if you could just click that again to take it down. And worst case scenario, we'll revisit this again after the last agenda item. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that one of the things that I love about this new thing that we're doing with all these video conferences is I get to see everyone's faces and their expressions, and some of us have some really expressive faces. So I'm happy to see you all in this time when all I have to hang out with is a teenager. So happy to do that. Our next speaker is someone who's really been with us at every Complete the Count, and is someone who is a tremendous resource, and that of course is Maria Matos, and she is from Census, the federal census. So let's see if we can get some updates from Maria. We thank you for being here. Chris, can you unmute her?
Yep, she should be good. Go ahead.
She's gonna bring us a lot of energy too, because she's like a firecracker too. So
thank you so much. I've been like when you're a child and you're like, I know that, I want to speak, I want to talk. So thank you so much for the bar president for this opportunity again. You guys have been wonderful. Also, Mr. Joseph Salvo, I'm afraid that you're going to take my job because that was amazing, the presentation. I enjoyed it. It was like amazing. And one of the things that I'm going to say is that Kathleen, yes, you're a great motivator, and the human touch, that phone call, sometimes it's much better than an email. Now, I'm going to say a few things. I've been taking some notes. You guys almost said it all, but it's been very challenging due to the coronavirus situation. But again, like Mr. Salvo said, that doesn't stop us from answering online. We can answer on the phone or mail the questionnaire back. Some of the neighborhoods, the responses in neighborhoods are different because, for instance, I'm gonna compare Co-op City, which indeed I'm so happy, we have more than 70% of household responses. When we targeted in 2018 Co-op City, right? We had the senior centers, JASA senior centers. We had programs like Neighborhood Shop. And the key from then to now is because it was a domino effect. When I connected in Co-op City with those organizations, they kept, organizing themselves and they kept conveying our message, right? In other areas, personally, like let's say in the area, let's say Wakefield, right? I connected and they did a great job, right? But the domino effect somehow stopped, right? So we're trying now to reconnect so we can increase the numbers there. Personally, like in Wakefield, I remember the Bronx Bar president did an amazing Complete Count Committee meeting and together with Community Board 12, who did an amazing job, in that area. I did personally reach out in the library in Wakefield, and we had a great response there. And in terms of like people coming to our event and listening and learning about what the census was all about. So we have to continue that domino effect. And from the point of view of a partnership specialist like me, and for you guys out there who doesn't know what we do specifically, when I connect with an organization right now, I go to the response rate map that you can go to 2020 census.gov/response-rate. So I look in certain specific neighborhoods, certain tracks, right? For instance, 164 track in the Bronx, that's Throgs Neck area. That area is by the pharmacy. So if I see that that area has low rate, very low rate response, I go to those organizations, right, that are my partners, and I go, hey, I need your help. And it's not only for an email or a phone call is, for instance, they can do virtual events, and all those areas that they connect through Facebook, etc. After by experience, after that event, the next day or the next 2 days, I immediately see an increase of the responses. I've done town hall meetings with different elected officials, and in the zip codes at that specific, let's say, senatorial district, the responses in those zip codes immediately they go up. Boogie Down Bronx, I've done 6 virtual events, and one organization that is in 169 Street, and immediately in that area, the response rate went up. So that domino effect, it has to continue with the help of the organizations. We are trying our best. All the partnership specialists, we have a great team, and we're trying our best to connect with the partners for them to give us events to attend, and it could be something like caregivers. They could, they all have iPhones, and they can help the seniors, answer the census. From that to a huge event. I know a partner of ours that is going to have a huge event soon, and all those programs that are under that partner, they're going to connect, and we're going to have a time frame where people are going to be like, okay, we're going to answer the census, and I'm going to be there. If anybody has a question about the questionnaire, I can answer right there. Because people have, questions like, how about if I answer, I made a mistake, and I go back and I correct that? Those are questions that people have that they don't know, and they forget about it, and they just don't go back. I saw a question before about the libraries. Yes, before this pandemic, we did target, we went to, personally, Pelham Bay, Eastchester, Hunts Point, Highbridge, Wakefield, Gun Hill Road. We amazing events in those libraries. They were very well attended, those events, and we targeted from millennials that went there, middle-aged individuals, and people who were retired who wanted, for instance, to apply for a part-time numerator job. That was our chance for us to convey our message. So moving forward, in Parkchester, specifically at 1955 Westchester, right? That's track 210. And the response rate over there is 61.20%. So the numbers are increasing. We do have staff who speak Bangladesh, Bengali, and they are trying to get us, partnership specialists, events where we can participate and talk, have that human touch with those individuals from that community in Parkchester, and so they can answer the census. We have community leaders who are Bengali, Bangladesh, who are targeting those pockets. It's, it's tough, we're trying our best, and certainly physical social distancing does not stop us from answering the census. It's challenging, but we're getting there. Once again, you can get the response rates percentage by going to 2020 census.gov/response-rates. In terms of the non-response follow-up, the NARFU operations, yes, we don't want to send someone to knock on your door. We want people to answer the census right away. We have until October 31st. It's been extended, that's great, but we can answer now. We can answer today, and in terms of that operation, yes, we are gonna send people. We're gonna follow the guidelines of the federal and state and local health authorities, and we're gonna send staff properly, with mask and gloves, etc. They're gonna put the kit there in front of their homes, and we're gonna try our best for people to answer the census, when they get that questionnaire, That's going to be our last attempt for people to answer. But it's up to us to answer the census. The Census Bureau can do gazillion campaigns on radio, TV, partnership specialists, but it's up to the community. It's like a family. It takes a village for people to answer. Example, I had a meeting with one of the community boards. They've been proactive. What happened? I had material here. One of the ladies who was going to help distribute food, she came to my house. I put the boxes out. She picked them up. And in every bag of food that they were giving, they put a little flyer. They gave a little chip clip there with the census message. So that's being proactive, you know, besides the emails, mass emails, etc. Another organization, like I said before, that organization in Boogie Down Bronx had 6 virtual events, you know, with individuals, you know, that were answering the census. Another event that I participated, it was in Passaic, New Jersey. 1,000 people were online in Facebook, you know, answering the census with that organization, and I was there. So we all need to be proactive. Besides being a partnership specialist from the census, I'm doing my effort in my neighborhood. I live in the area of Country Club. And someone, I think it was Mr. Salvador, says that owners of homes, they need also to answer the census. In my area in Country Club, there are a lot of homeowners, and they need to answer the census. It's not only in areas and pockets that people are afraid, individuals are afraid to answer the census because of their legal status or whatever. Also, people are thinking, well, I'm not going to go online because I'm afraid of scams and internet. Well, we have other ways of answering. We all need to answer it. I don't know, in my notes, I have a lot of notes here. That's it, you know. If you do have any organization that you need for me to be in an event for you guys, or go through the questionnaires for every question, please let me know. I'm here to help. Tracy and Marika, they know my email address. You guys know my number. Give it to them so I can help in any way that you need. One last thing that I'm going to say, because people are indeed concerned, remember that we do not ask for your legal status, your social security number, your credit card number, your political party affiliation, any donations. If you receive an email that is a phony email, you can email us at rumors@census.gov. Let us know, or call 844-330-2020. We don't ask in the 2020 census for your, if you're a citizen or not. That is not in the questionnaire. So it's only 9 questions, plus number 10 is about the other members of your family. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It's excellent presentation as always. Thank you for keeping us in the loop. I just have a question that came to mind as everyone else gets queued up and, you know, raises their hands virtually. I know that obviously we want to self-respond, and that's what most of our meetings are about. But just to be clear in my mind, when enumerators are out in the streets, they will target so-called areas of low response. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. And Chris, do we have any hands up?
So at the moment, no. Whoops, sorry, at the moment, no. I guess one last reminder, if anybody needs to ask a question in WebEx, click the small hand icon in the bottom right corner of the participant list. And for those of you who are calling in on the phone, hit *9 on your phones. dialing pad, and it'll raise your hand. At the moment, I don't see any hands raised.
It looked like someone said in the chat that they're trying to raise their hand. Is that, did I see that correctly?
Oh, Kathleen. Okay, yeah.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
ahead.
I've got a lot of windows open, so I'm not late for my next event. So I need your help, Bronx. What I'm wanting to do and set up next, especially because it's getting warmer now. I want to do this the way we do. I'm a Brooklyn girl, right? So we know how to do when we want to make some noise. And I think one of the great ways to do this is to make some noise. And I am ready to get on a truck with a megaphone or some speakers. You know, we've got something tricked out. And I want to drive through every hood in the city, especially where there's low numbers. So somebody help me. I need some people. I need some contacts. You know, go to those churches that you know, will go out there and preach a gospel. And let's talk about census. You know, DJs, you know, people that have got these tricked out really loud speakers in their cars or their trucks. I want to talk to them. Let's do this, ready to rock the streets, right? We can't knock on their doors, but doesn't mean we can't drive past those doors, right? So please inbox me, kadaniel@census.nyc.gov, so we can take it to the streets as it gets warmer and people are sitting outside. Thanks.
So Kathleen, let's be a little bit more specific for us folks. You're looking to do like some caravanning, is that what I'm hearing? And you're looking for volunteers to participate on every level, DJs,
Yes.
making noise, whatever.
Yes, so a caravan, or you know, parade season is coming, but we're not going to be having parades, right? People that have like a van or pickup truck, people that have speakers, you know, a megaphone, anything, so that we can drive through certain communities, so we can drive through developments and make noise and tell people to go online or pick up the phone and get the census done. So if you know any way that we can drive through communities and make noise, open to ideas, because that's the next thing that we want to plan and put together in every borough across the city.
Okay, okay. That's exciting. And again, what I'm hearing in terms of like novel ideas, best practices is this caravanning. It's not Eastern Parkway, but it's gonna be the Bronx best thing to Eastern Park, the Bronx answer to Eastern Parkway. How about that?
I want to say something, Marika.
Yes.
I want to say this, that Kings County had today 46.6, but the Bronx has 50.4%. That's for you.
I'm gonna friendly scold you because we already know we're the best in the Bronx. We don't want to rub it in their face. It's not really. Okay. But thank you.
But Staten Island is crushing it. They're actually, I started a thing over there in one of their things. I was like, you know what? Hashtag crush it Staten Island. And now they're tweeting that and texting it because they're at 55.7%. So I can no longer say Staten Island is a myth. So the rest of us got to bring it up.
Well, they're there. They're the forgotten borough, they say. I guess they have to be counted.
Oh, yeah, Deputy Naomi Rivera wanted to speak or ask a question.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. Go right ahead. Naomi?
Let's see.
Okay, can you unmute her?
I just did again. It was unmuted, but I just did it. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Madam Deputy President. So I wanted to share something that we're doing. I work with a nonprofit called HITN, Hispanic Information Telecommunications Network, and we launched a Tu Cuenta Census 2020 essay writing contest for fourth graders, a citywide initiative designed to raise awareness regarding the need to for children to be counted in the Census 2020, with a specific focus on maximizing the participation of families in those hard to count communities. So fourth grade students from schools located in those hard to Maria Matos, the Bronx Census Specialist, and other census specialists throughout the city of New York. We identified the schools. They've been invited to participate. The students have written about the importance of being counted and how it will directly impact them and their communities. Now, one winner from each school of the five boroughs will be selected to represent their school and their borough, the place they call home, in the citywide portion of the competition. 15 winners from the five boroughs will compete online to be named HITN NYC Student Census Ambassador. This is a three-phase competition. The first phase was the writing and submitting of the essays. We are there. The second phase, which will be launched on Tuesday, is the unveiling of a census essay website. Now, there's two parts to this. In that website, we're going to be highlighting the 15 schools from the five boroughs, and we're encouraging the Complete Count Committee members from each of the five boroughs to send messages of support for two reasons. One, it's a small way to thank the students and the teachers who participated in the census essay contest, especially during the remote learning challenge. And then secondly, to help build momentum leading up to phase 3, which will be a live online voting. The live online voting. But we're asking the students to visit the website, and we're hoping that they will be motivated as student census advocates. These are fourth graders to continue their efforts with their families to do the outreach. We're hoping that they will see the messages of support. Bronx, we've got to turn out because it is a city. We've got to support our students. Part B of phase 2 is live chats through Facebook and Instagram, engaging again our community with the focus of census and motivating self-response, as well as, our students having an opportunity to experience borough pride, community spirit through this virtual process. Phase 3 is where we will, and CUNY is a partner in this effort. They are the ones that are reading the essays. This CUNY Census Corps are reading the essays, and they will be selecting the 15 finalists. It is 3 schools in every borough. In fact, one of those schools is in Parkchester. Again, we have identified schools in the hardest to count neighborhoods. And phase 3, we announced the finalists, and then the website will have a page for online voting, and it will be a citywide push. We are encouraging families through Borough Pride, school spirit, community spirit to participate in the voting process, hoping that we will maximize participation through this effort and awareness. So what we'd like to ask in phase 2, again, as I close, we're going to be sending out an email blast. We would like our borough president's office to help us with that, to email all of the Complete Count Committee members so that you have the information. So you submit simple messages of support like this. Go 105, which is one of our Bronx schools. And then we're going to ask you to, help us when it comes to the live chats when we get to that portion in the next couple weeks to participate, lend information and ideas. So thank you once again. I'm glad that I was able to share this with you. It is really an exciting essay contest. The kids are really excited about it, and we now want to, again, send messages of support to let them know that we recognize them as fourth grade student census ambassadors, appreciate what they're doing, that what they're doing is super important.
That's amazing. I mean, that is so key to what we've been trying to do in terms of just having the young people get plugged in. And we know those of us who have children, when the kids are like, We end up
Yes.
doing what the kids are telling us. This is what I'm doing in school. Did you do the census, mommy? Did you do the census, daddy? Whatever the case may be. So that is something that cuts across all of ethnicities, we know, because the kids kind of move us along. So this is a tremendous project that that Borough President and the Complete the Count Committee will definitely support. I know I know that I don't have to say it, but please make sure you just send all that information. We will disseminate, and the borough president and myself, respectively, will be involved in supporting all the youth in the Bronx. As always,
we need to push the Bronx. I want those numbers to be strong when we get to the online voting as well. I'm a Bronxite, so while this is citywide. Thank you, Maria.
Absolutely. We want all of that Bronx pride. Just as we demonstrated, we don't want to rub our nose in the Brooklyn, our success in the nose of Brooklynites, but we want to make sure that they know, we're the best bee in but it looks like we're going a little bit over time in terms of anticipation, but the conversation and the connections are really, really what we're here for, and the best practices. And I know that I've come up with a couple of new ideas while we were engaging here today. So I'm going to say two things, and then it's we're done. The first thing I have to do is thank our staff. I thank Chris and Cecilia and Tracy and Tara, and everybody that has really, persevered through this and continue to make this a wonderful effort to get everyone connected, and those newsletters that you get and the constant emails that you get. I just want to thank the staff for doing that from their humble homes. So thank you for that. I want to give everyone else on the conference an opportunity that if you have not spoken or asked a question or have a comment or want to just share a best practice, that without any issues with time, because this is exactly what we want to do. Don't think because we're not rushing you off. We're here for this purpose. So if there's anyone who, as I'm speaking, wants to share a best practice, a comment, a concern, direct a question to one of our past speakers, at this time, raise your hand virtually. If you're on the phone call, then it's *9 to raise your hand and be acknowledged. And I'm looking at Kristen's expression. I don't see.
So we have Destiny Cruz has her hand raised, so I'm unmuting her line now.
Okay.
Destiny, go ahead.
Thank you. So two things. One, one of the things that our office is doing with the representative is that all of our staff, both in New York and in DC, our signatures have the link to self-report. We encourage people in our signatures to say, hey, the census is, there's all these options and all these ways that you can sign up for the census. So all 18 of us, we have that in any communication we have with a constituent organization, we have that blurb there. So that's what we're doing on our end. And I do just have one last question. Is there a way that we can get a list of all of the complete count committees by neighborhood of our districts?
If you would shoot us an email in terms of what your request, send that to Tracy, and we will decipher how to get that information to you. I know that it's available, but we want to make sure that we get you exactly what you need, and we can do that offline.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would just
do that. Thank you.
I would add that the census page on our website has a list that Tracy has maintained with me, but there is a list there that has all of the organizations that are part of the Bronx Complete Count Committee. And then, tailoring that to the specific congressional districts that, obviously do what the deputy said and follow up, but it is posted if you want to see everybody right now. It is on there.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, in terms of other questions, V Haro, there's a username down here. If you just identify yourself, go ahead.
Everyone, Vanette from the Hispanic Federation. Hispanic Federation is doing outreach to food pantries, houses of worship, and right now what we're doing is we're having an event this Saturday. It's called Census Loteria, which is like a lottery, bingo. So we're hosting anything to keep the family engaged. At the same time, we all are in that space where we're kind of bored. We don't know what to do, what else to do. So we're incorporating bingo night in the census. So we're having a conversation about the census. So I can send that information in the flyer to Tracy, and hopefully if she's willing to provide that to all, so we can post it on our social media, that'll be more than, thank you.
You somehow put my two greatest passions together. You put census and bingo. I don't know. I was born ready for.
You know what we could do together is like an American Idol. Everyone loves to perform for others, but we could also bring the census. That's something you and I can work on.
I love it. I love it. Chris?
Gee, we have to team up because we're working on census karaoke for June. Oh my gosh.
Okay, we're doing this. We're doing this. Woo!
Woo! Okay, what else we have going on, Chris?
Just another hand raised right now. Emilio Tavares, you're unmuted. Emilio, go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. My name's Emilio. I'm with Hunger Free America, and I, have been working with some organizations in the Bronx, and we're concerned that there's a high level of homelessness in the Bronx, and we're not too clear on where the outreach for those populations are. So we just love some information that we can provide to our colleagues.
That question comes up quite a bit in terms of the duration of our complete the count. Maria's still on?
Yes, I'm here.
Maria, can you address this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of counting homeless.
Yes. Thank you, Hunger Free. You guys are a great partner. You are my partners through Filomena Acevedo. So you're doing a great job conveying our message. Yes, well, at the moment, due to the coronavirus, we're trying to figure out when to, go out there, because the top priority is the safety of the employees and the public, in general. However, we will be targeting like the food pantries, the soup kitchens, and try to use their help to count homeless who go there for food, etc. But in terms of like on April 1st, we were planning to go to every platform in the city from the train stations. We couldn't do it because of the pandemic, but we will follow up on that, and we will figure out once the operations, the group quarters, and we call it operaciones de campo, like out there operations, they start again. But we will definitely count the homeless.
So what would be the message I would pass on to someone?
Well, at the moment, we don't have a set date to do that like we plan to do on April 1st because of the coronavirus. However, we're targeting the food.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that. I meant more like if I meet someone who is homeless, do I tell them to fill out the census where they live, or what's the appropriate? What should a homeless person do?
If they don't have a place to live, but they do go to, for food, to a soup kitchen, food pantry, they can get the information there and get help there to get counted.
So to be clear, because again, this question comes up quite a bit. Is it the say for example, the shelter, that
Yes.
count the individual, or does that individual need to respond in some way?
They can, okay. Some individuals who are homeless, they refuse to go to a shelter for whatever reasons. But they can go to a shelter and ask the staff there for help on how to answer the census, and they can put that address. That's one. Number two, when they go to take food from a food pantry or some kitchen, they can also ask them to help them answer the census, and they can put that address.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Yes.
That I thought that we would get to the point where we want to make sure that if you see someone and that's the population in particular that you work with, and you see them and like what I guess would be a street homeless person who's not traditionally in the shelter or housed some other way, they can use those addresses as their residence and report themselves, obviously, is the point. Chris?
Let's see, one more check. I don't think there's any additional hands raised. So yeah, on that front, I think we are good.
Again, the much thanks to everyone that is on the call now or is on the call earlier and had to go. These things are important. Meetings such as this, we hope bring information, keep us plugged in, keep us sufficiently motivated, and keep us sufficiently on task to make sure that we are doing everything that we can do to make 2020 count productive. It is important to understand that that in the pandemic is an example. It is a challenge, but it serves as a example of why we need to be counted, why we need to make sure that services and are brought to our communities. And so for that reason, we need to use this crisis as a launching pad for so many of the things that we need to do in conjunction with making sure that we're being counted. I know that you're going to all do your part, and the Complete the Count is here to help you make sure that that happens. So that being said, I thank you all for your time. I thank you all for your commitment to this. And I just want to end the meeting with much gratitude to everyone and to the staff for everything that you do. Thank you very much.